Hello everyone, my name is Nick, and if you want to learn PHP in under 15 minutes, then this video is just the right video for you. So what is PHP? PHP is a hypertext processor, which is a server-side scripted language used to develop web applications. In other words, you use PHP to implement the functionality of a website page. Now, before we begin to write our first line of PHP code, I'm assuming that you have already installed an Apache server and PHP. They usually come in bundles such as XAMPP or WAMP or MAMP or macOS. However, if you haven't done that yet, check the link in the description below, perform the installation, and then come back to this video and continue with the tutorial. So with no further ado, let's create our first PHP file and produce our first line of PHP code. I'm going to create a new PHP file just like that by naming it index.php. The reason why I call it index is because the default web server configuration says that whenever there's an index page, it will be loaded up as the default page on the website. Now, our first line of code will be echo hello world. Now, echo is a command that prints out the message specified within the double quotes in here, which is hello world. And the statement is ending with semicolon, which is pretty much the standard procedure in any C family language. Now, let's run this PHP code and see what happens. As you can see, hello world is printed out on the website. Now, what if you want to add some extra string at the end of it without changing the value inside here? Well, we can use concatenation operator. You can use the dot symbol over here and add another string within the double quotes and say anything you want. So, hello world, what a beautiful evening. There we go. Now, if we refresh the page right over here, you're going to see that the message has been added, or in other words, we have concatenated, joined these two statements together. Now, next up is variables. What is a variable? You can think of a variable as a container that stores a specific value. So you can store a value of a string, number, and so on and so forth. So let's take a look at an example variable called a, which has the value of 5. So this means every time we're going to print out our variable a, we're going to get the value 5 printed out. Let's take a look at how this works. So you can do that simply by writing echo and the name of the variable $a. We use dollar to signify that this is a variable, and under no circumstances should you use another symbol in the variable or use a number just before you start the variable. So if you use something like this, it's not going to work. You can use A1, but you can't use 1A. Now, the next thing is comments. So you can comment out by putting those two slashes right over there. So you can create a single line comment, or you can create a multi-line comment just by typing / and closing that with the same way. Next up is operators. So operators are just like the mathematical operators. So you have plus sign, minus, division, and of course multiplication. Let's introduce another variable called b, and let's give it a value of 6. Now if we want to perform an addition, all we have to do is type the plus sign and $b, and it's going to perform the addition for us. There we go. In the same spirit, you can do subtraction, multiplication, and division. So those are the operators, including the concatenation operator I covered just right over here. So what is an if-else statement? In case you have two more variables to compare or two more values to compare with, and you want to have a specific outcome depending on the result, then you're going to use if-else statements. So let's create an example if-else statement for variable a and variable b. So if variable a is higher than 4, then what we want to do is echo out variable a is higher than 4. And we're going to use the else statement right over here and echo out variable a is lower than 4 in case the variable a is lower than 4. So I'm going to get rid of this line over here, and let's run the code and see the output. Variable a is higher than 4 because obviously we have assigned the value 5 to variable a. So if we want to compare a variable to another variable instead of comparing it to a literal number, then what we can do is just replace this comparison here. A is larger than b, and of course we have to change this here. If a is larger than b, then variable a is higher than variable b. Variable a is lower than variable b. So let's run the code. There we go. Variable a is lower than variable b because 5 is less than 6. Now another thing that we can also use, which is very handy, is loops. So we have 3 types of loops that we can use, and we're going to begin with the for loop. So the for loop takes 3 arguments inside here. So for $i is 0, I is less than 10, I plus plus. So what does this mean? So the very first information that we pass in is the initialization. So we initialize a variable to 0. So we're going to start the counter from the 0. This is the condition that we have to pass in. So for as long as the value given every single time is less than 10, it will execute the code inside here, and will also at the same time execute the code here. So in simple words, we initialize the variable a to 0, and for as long as this variable is less than 10, it's going to keep incremented. The plus plus symbol stands for incrementing it by 1, and minus minus also decrements that by 1. Let's take a look and print out the values we would normally get. So we're going to echo out the I value, and here's the result. So since we started counting from 0, it counted 0 till 9. Now if we change this to 1 and we change that to 11, it's going to print out all numbers between 1 and 10. Let's take a look again. There we go. Same thing can be accomplished with a while loop. So in the while loop, we're going to need to declare a counter before the while loop. So we're going to declare I equal to 0 outside the while loop, and inside the while loop we're going to put the condition, just like we had in the for loop right over here. So for as long as I is less than 11, we're going to echo out, and we're also going to have to increment the I within the while block. And there we go, we got the exact same result in a slightly different way. Now we can also do a for each loop, which is slightly different from the for and the while loop. So in the for each, we have to use a range. So we can use a range between 1 and 10, and we type as value. So this means that for every single number within the range identified by the $value variable, we can do some specific tasks in here. So we can print out the value of the variable value, pretty much. Let's refresh, and you can see 1 through 10 is the output again. So it goes through the range starting from 1 and ending to 10. We use the value as the variable, and we echo out the value at each iteration. So this concludes the loops. Now let's take a look at an array. So there are 2 types of arrays. There's an index array and an associated array. So let's take a look at an index array and what it is. So you can call your variable array if you wish to, and all you have to do is put the brackets in here, and within the brackets you can specify the values you want to be passed. So for example, we can have milk, eggs, bread. Now this array stores 3 separate elements that can be accessed using just one array. So this is the benefits of an array. You can also store different types of variables and different types of values within an array. It doesn't have to be all just strings. So we can use the number 1, 2, 3, 4 at the end. So we can store multiple values, multiple variables, and multiple types of variables within the same array without any sort of issue. In order to access those values from the array, we have to use an index pointer. So this is why this is an index array. An index is pretty much the position within the array. So as you can see, milk is the very first element within the array. So this is why we can say array 1. Right? So let's see what happens if we echo out array 1. We're going to get eggs. But wait a second. Eggs is the second element, it's not the first one. Now here's how arrays work. They start counting from 0, just like we started counting from 0 in the iterator for the for loop. So we put 0 over here and we refresh, we're going to get the milk value. So don't forget that index positions are counted from 0 and so forth. Now an associative array is somewhat different. An associative array has a key and a value pair. So let's take a look at an associative array. So let's say we have 3 liters of milk. We can just use this operator right over here, which is going to assign the value 3 to the keyword milk within the associative array. Now let's make one more example and let's take a look at how it works. So we have the milk, and let's say we have 6 eggs. So if we echo associative 0, you're going to get an error, undefined offset. Now the reason why we get this is because this is an associative array. So we would have retrieve the value by using the key. And the key in this case is milk. So we type echo source milk, then we're going to get the actual value 3. Now the for each loop that we covered just before is very useful for the associative arrays because it allows you to go through an associative array in a very easy manner. So let's take a look at how it can be used. We can write for each, and within the parentheses we're going to include the array name, and we're going to type as item. So this is going to take the associative array that we created. It's going to regard each and every single element within that array as variable item. So we can type echo item, and we're going to get the values of every single item within the array. Let's take a look. There we go. Got 3 and we got 6. Now the final bit is actually writing the forms. So we're going to cover how to create a form, how to submit one, and how to process one. So for this, we're going to need to get rid of all the code right over here, and we're going to create an HTML document. Just like that. So within the body, what you need to do is create a form. And the form has an action and a method. But before I cover what those two are, I'm going to continue with the form, and I'm going to add input, which can be of type text, number, so you pretty much specify what sort of input that is. It's going to give us a text box that we can use, and we're also going to need an input of type submit, which is going to create a button that once clicked on it is going to perform the action with a certain method. And now let's see what action and method is. Now for action, you'll have to specify a link where the code will be processed. So for example, if the code is processed in an index, you can use index.php. However, if your code is processed in another page, just process.php, then you can use that one. So for the method, there are two options. There's the get method and there's the post method. Both those methods signify the way PHP is going to handle your form's data. So if you use get, it will append the values that you have submitted in here at the end of the URL. So let's take a look of how this would look like. First of all, you will have to add another attribute called name and type the name of the input you'd like to use. So the name could be just text. So let's go to process.php, and we're going to create an if statement, and within the if statement we're going to write isEt function, which is going to check whether or not an input with the name text has actually been provided. So this variable is going to fetch the value from this input, and therefore it's going to give us the value of the input. So let's go and echo out get text. So this means if there's a value submitted in our form right over here, then we can pretty much print it out. Otherwise, we can say echo. Now let's take a look at how this would work and submit. There we go. We got the value hello, and we also have text equal hello appended at the end of the URL. Now this is pretty much the major difference between get and post method. I'm going to show you how post method would be implemented in this case. So if we had this to post, you would then have to use in the process.php the $_post associative array, just like that, and we would echo out the value here. Now in this case, we wouldn't get anything appended at the end of the URL. So let's take a look at it. Let's refresh this page. Let's type hello. It should print out hello again, but in this case, it wouldn't append anything at the end. So this is pretty much it for this video. Thank you very much